Hello friends, so welcome to this lecture on Azure Policies deep dive. So in this lecture, we'll try to understand the implementation process that when we implement the Azure policies, how they are implemented and what are the steps. And then we try to understand the policy effects like determine what happens when the policy rule is evaluated to match, what are the different behaviors or whatever the different outcomes we have. So as your policy implementation process, the first step is like creation. So policy creation or definition, has certain conditions under which it is enforced. So when we create the policy, so we want that, okay, if these conditions are met, then it produce certain amount of results. What should be the overall effect? Like if resources are not tagged, then what kind of effect it should have, right? We want that, uh, the effect would be that, okay, we want to put the tag or what we want. We want to remove the tag and add some other tag. So we will create the policy definition, like, what kind of actions we want from the policies, right? What kind of results we are looking from the policy. And then in the next phases, now we know that, okay, this is the policy we have created, and now policy will be assigned to certain resources, right? To some scope. So in this phase, like policy is created and is assigned to some scope to achieve that desired light. Because let's say the scope could be the policy for the specific VMs, the policy could be for a subscription, the policy could be for a resource group, the policies could be only for the Cosmos DBs, right? So assigning is like we need, we have a clear picture in mind that, okay, where we are assigning those policies, I mean to which resource group. Because remember, in the previous lecture we discussed that policies are for the resource properties, right? That what kind of resources we want to provision. And once we have assigned the policy, the next step comes is the evaluation, like calculating the result. Once it could be applied already created resource, let's say the VM which is already deployed, or let's say for the future deployments. It is evaluation is nothing but matching, basically matching that, okay, uh, the policy with the resource definitions. Like if we say that, okay, policy says that, okay, the VM with the certain RAM should be provisioned, then it will evaluate that, okay, whether the VM which is provisioned in a particular resource group is having that configuration or not. So that evaluation is done in this particular phase. And if not match, then take the action. Then the last step is the remediation. So remediation is nothing about but the effect which tell what will happen when the policy is evaluated and match. So the effects behave differently if they are for a new resources or for an updated resource or for an existing resource, right? So each and every policy definition in Azure has a single effect, and that effect, so we'll discuss in the upcoming slides, and that effect is basically determines what happens basically when the policy rule is evaluated to match. So there are different options we have. It could deny, it can disable, modify, we can modify the tags, we can modify different things, right? Or whichever thing we want to modify. So in case the in case when the policy is evaluated and match. And then we have the policy definitions. So there are following parameters when we create the policies we define, because let's say when we create the policies we need to define certain things. And so these are the different things which we create when we create the policies. So mode, it basically tells which type of resource will be evaluated for the policy. I mean, resources could be your virtual machines, right? It could be your databases, right? It could be your storage account. So in this case, we'll tell that, okay, which resource type will be evaluated for policy. Then we have the parameter. It simply simplify your policy management by reducing the number of policy definitions. Think of parameters in the form of like name, address, city, state. So this really help, from a management perspective. Like we have given that name, address, city, state. So we should not be repeating all this information again. Let's say in case we are building up a new policy for a certain resource. And then we have is the display name. So display name is nothing that okay, if we want to give a policy name, then we can provide the name over there. And then description is pretty clear. And policy rule is actually the heart of the policy that contains the logical evaluation in effect. Evaluation like wherein the policy needs to be evaluated that okay, if this condition is match, what could be the effect? So evaluation could be conditions like deny if network watcher is not enabled, define, and effect is define what would you like to do if the condition is met. So for example, we'll see the different things in case of a policy. So this is the network watcher policy from Azure. See, this policy audits if network watcher is not enabled for a, let's say, specified region. You specify the name of the region to check whether network watcher is enabled or not. So you can see the name we have specified audit network watcher existence. And this is the display name. Like, it is pretty obvious that, okay, audit if network watcher is not enabled for a region, and description we have given for the policy. Here is the, you can say the policy rule we have. These are the parameters. You remember we have mentioned that, okay, which location, type, and all those things we have mentioned. And then in the policy, we discuss about the policy rule, which will define the actual statements, which will evaluate that, okay, what we need to do or what it needs to match. And see, it is saying that, okay, Microsoft network or virtual networks audit if it does not exist. What like the type of resources? If monitor the network if the network watcher does not exist, and the resource group like to which resources it would be like a network watcher RG in a certain location. So these are the different fall of you can say the modes we are checking that a policy definition, which are the parameters we need, which are the different options we need to create when we are creating the policy or when we are building the policy definition like display name, description, parameters, and effect, what could be like audit if not exist, right? Like audit if not exist, if the network budget does not exist, audit that, right? So in a certain location. So these are the different parameters we have in case of policies. So this is like we have gone through the example we have seen, and then we have is the policy effects like we discussed in the previous lecture as well, that each policy or which we have in Azure has has a certain effect. So each policy definition in Azure policy has a single effect, and that policy determines what happen when that rule is evaluated to match, and that like behave differently if it is a new resource or updated resource or an existing resource. So the first one is the append. So append is nothing but you can say used to add additional fields to the requested resource during the creation or update. Like a common example is specifying allowed IPs for a storage range, right? So in this case, it will append like if we want to add some extra information. And then we have is the what we call is that audit. So audit is used to create a warning event, let's say in case of activity log when evaluating a non-compliant resource. But remember, it does not stop the request. So in that case, we can use the audit. Let's say if network watcher is not enabled, right, then it should create an alert like we discussed in the previous example. So these are the different options we have uh, in case of policy effects. And the like we have discussed the audit if not exist. So audit if not exist enables the auditing on a resource that matches the if condition but does not have the component specified in the details. Like for example, we discussed that okay, if network watcher on a certain resource group in case of a virtual network does not exist, then right we like in the previous policy we discussed, like we can also you can also create like evaluate the virtual machines to determine if the anti-malware exists, extension exists, then audit when missing, right? So in that case, if that particular thing is missing, then it audits that. So the name is simple, like audit if not exist. Like if we are looking for a certain resource, if we are looking for a compliant resource and if it does not exist, then audit, right? In this case, it will anyway audit and alert, but does not stop. And then we have is the deny. So deny is basically used to prevent a resource request that does not match the defined standard through a policy definition and fails the reset. So in that case, we want to straightway deny. So disabled is generally used for the testing situations. And the next we have in the list is modify. So modify is used to add, update, or remove tags on a certain resource during the creation or update. Like a common example is like updating the tags on a resource such as cost center, billing information. So all these things we can mention in case of modify. And then an example of modify could be adding the environment tag and replacing the existing environment tag with the, let's say, let a test or test one, right? Or maybe environment tag could be billing information. So all those information we can update using the modify. So a quick recap. In this lecture, we discussed about the implementation process, and then we discussed about the policy definition details and what are the different effects in case of Azure policies. So this is it, friends, in this lecture. Thank you for watching this lecture. Meet you in the next lecture. Thank you.